Twitch to catch on that I'm live. Come on, Twitch. Being a little slow. There we are. Alright. So, I'll tell the world. Streaming NDD of gonna do spaceship stuff. Paste. Alright, so now I'll do it here. I just drank a big soda because I was short on caffeine, and it very well may be that I make obnoxious burping noises, so I apologize in advance. I'll try not to do it straight into the mic. So when we left off last week, what we had done is we tested this other kind of ship and we'd added in an elevator. This kind of ship is one where it has a lot more confined spaces to work with, because that's really the point of this. It's trying to make the best program, the best crew quarters you can, without having just a free slate every single time. Because, I mean, if it's going to just be you having an endless amount of open space every single time, then you're going to get into habits, and you're going to do the same things a lot of the time. So by having different kinds of physical constraints, we can, sort of shake that up a little bit. But there are things here that that are not perfect for most of our ship setups. For example, if we wanted to add in an ops chamber, we could add in an ops chamber right here. But if we did that, then the ops chamber and the bridge would have equal priority. So that's the sort of thing you got to think about. And maybe you want the bridge to have a higher priority, and you've got to figure out some other way to arrange it all. But either way, that's not what we're going to do today, because we did that last week. What we're going to do today is we're going to try and figure out what we're going to do. I'm actually not 100% sure. So we have most of the pieces we need to start getting started with this. The problem is that right now we don't have any sort of setup for the crew. We have crew, but they're not properly set up. So I guess the first thing I'll do is I'll point these crew members at the correct crew, because right now they're pointed at the wrong crew. So I'll just go over to the crew member. Canvas. And there are the crew, and let's just connect them to these crew pop-ups. These are temporary. Later on we're going to have this stuff all automatically happen. But for right now, it's just the way it is. So we're just going to drop in Alice. This Alice. I don't know if we have to drop it in both spots. We might not. I don't think we do. Bob. And George. There. Same crew members, because I just cloned the bridge, but now they're actually going to be pointed at the right place. Congratulations. And that'll be a big help, but our main camera is in a really awful spot, so let's just rearrange it so you can see things a little bit better. So you can see how this sort of works. The UI is currently fairly poor in terms of being legible, but you can see the basic idea is that there are 3 missions currently ongoing, all of which are orange, and then there is the blue pilot ship, which just got completed. And the characters are getting tired really fast here, because they don't have any place to rest aboard this ship. There's none of the resting facilities have been put in, because I didn't really know how to fit them into this mess. But it might be worth trying. Let's go ahead and try it. Let's take some resting elements and try and add them in. Just to get a feel for what it's going to be like when we do have a UI that allows the player to make these changes. Mess hall, just drop it in. There it is. So you can see that the mess hall is wide, but the door is down the middle, which means that we can just plonk it in anywhere where there is going to be space. And unfortunately for us, that's not going to be here, because these are staircases. You can't tell when you're not in play mode, but basically, if you can see, these are actually staircases that go up. So we can't have that slam into the thing. What we can do is we can move all of these elements forward 1 unit. Like so. And then move this like so. And now we should have a resting spot for all of our crew members. Yeah, see? So they get to the bridge without going through the resting spot, which is why when they go to pilot the ship, they don't actually stop off and have lunch. But all of these other units pass through the resting stop, which is right here. You can't see it very well in this particular camera angle, but it's this circle right here is on one side of it. So, just... I think I'm going to shrink these red elements because they are really pretty functional rooms. Can I just... There we are. Now we can actually see something a little bit better. And down here we've got crew quarters. And then we've got posts. There we are. Now we can actually see. So this is the crew quarters where they start. And they move through the ship. And when they get an assignment from the bridge, it might be that the bridge tells them to stay on the bridge. But usually the bridge is going to tell them to go and work on one of these back here, an actual ship system. When they do that, they pass through the corridors back towards the back of the ship. They have to pardon the displays that I've got. This is not what you would see in the game. You wouldn't bother to see these internals at all. But the point is that they move through this in order to get to the back of the ship, at which point that triggers a resting cycle. So by arranging things properly, you can set things up so that your crew don't get too exhausted. All right, well, now that I have gone ahead and reminded myself of what the heck I'm doing, it's probably worth thinking about what we're going to do for this cycle, for this particular episode. I kind of want to just build another ship. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to build a ship because I don't really feel like working on the code today. Where the next step is probably to start importing people, faces, stuff like that. I'm not sure I want to do that on stream. So I think what I might do is I might do a run through of that this weekend because it is a long weekend, and then I will just come back next Wednesday and it'll be halfway done, and we'll just have to finish off the job. Because that's something that goes wrong really, really easily, trying to completely import a completely new set of parameters. That's a bit of a challenge. So, we don't want to waste everybody's time with me screwing that around. So what we're going to do now is we're going to build a kind of ship, a new kind of ship, and we have to decide what kind of ship it's going to be. But more than that, what we have to do is we have to pull the tortoise back, because the tortoise actually has some integration with these doors. And for right now, they're separate objects because someone was really kind of dumb and forgot to merge them. So we're going to go ahead and merge them. I'm just testing to make sure that the mirroring is the same. You can see how this is X and that's Y, so their axes are different. So we're going to just apply a rotation here and then change it to X. And now it still works fine, and so now we can just merge them like this. And now we won't have a separate room for a separate door set of objects. Those door visuals should be part of the ship. And when they're low poly like this, it's fine. I mean, this isn't like super low poly, but it's medium poly. I think it's like, 1,000, 10,000 faces maybe most. That's only 3,000 faces. Yeah, so that's not very much. It's quite small. When we're going to want to build another ship, we have to decide what kind of ship we want to build. Here is some stuff I put in just to show the basic layout possibilities of the ship that I just moved off to the side, this ship here. It's actually got these basic hookups. These are a good way for me to test and see what sort of possibilities there are, but I screwed up when I did this because I didn't take into account the way that stairs work, because this was before I had built stairs. So this is not of any use. We're going to just delete it. And we're going to go ahead and make a new set of objects, but I think I'm going to start from that boxy setup that we just saw. So we're going to create a cube just to start with, and we're going to try and make it so that it has a specific shape to the course that the player can create their habitation elements. So for that, we're going to just scale this up by 2, and this is a 4x4 grid or box, and that's the size of the module space. Every module is 4x4, but they do go up and down by 2s. So the next deck is, if we were to duplicate this, the next deck isn't down here, it's here. So that's why I screwed up when I did this originally. It was actually a situation where I had forgotten that, and so it didn't quite work. So we're going to use fire for one set and glow for the other set, just so that we have distinguishing marks. We're going to use glow for the rooms that we have to have connected to the ship. These must be hallways because they connect to ship facilities. Now, what we've got over here is we've got a very, very light ship that has nothing. It's just literally a training ship. And then we've got, baby's first warp ship, which has warp drives, but doesn't really have anything else. And then we've got this cargo hauler, which doesn't have warp drives, but it has this long chain of cargo units because that's fun, right? I think that what we're going to want to have is trying to think of a good kind of ship. If any of you have a fun idea for a class of ship, a relatively small kind of ship, let me know. Let me just quickly check and make sure that everything is running okay, because I actually didn't check. Test, yeah, mic's okay. I think everything's running fine. Yeah, I think it's all good. All right, so I guess we can try and make some sort of... See, we're not going to talk about fighter craft because there's not really any crew compartment customization for a fighter craft. You're not going to have sleeping spaces on a fighter craft, but we could do a destroyer or some other kind of small frigate. So we could create a military vessel, a patroller. And I don't usually do that, but why not? It's kind of a fun thing to have happen. So if we're going to have a military vessel, we're going to have a few distinct pieces. Now, the back end of the ship is what I've been focusing on in the past, because that's what these ships all have. They got engines pointed backwards, and because they've got engines pointed backwards, the front half of the ship can be where all of the crew compartments go. But in a military ship, we're going to have some weapons and some hull elements at the front and on the sides and that sort of stuff, which is going to make it a little bit difficult for us to just have a front that's open. So we're not going to have a front that's open, and that's why I'm making this a military vessel. I guess I could make it a science vessel. Let's go ahead and go with military first. Either way, these orange cubes are going to be cubes that the player is likely to place wherever they want. They're not going to be mandatory points. But what I'd like to have is I'd like this small military vessel to have a broadside made out of these rather than out of weapons, because it's not going to be a large enough ship to have a weapons broadside. So we're just going to let it have a broadside like this for crew compartments or whatever other units you want to have peeking out into the space area. And you can have them bleed out through the crack and, just float outside of the ship, but then of course they're not going to have any armor over them because the armor is going to go above and below this element, right? But having it with only one floor is also going to be a poor idea. So what we're going to want to have is a separate floor for above and below. Now, having it up here is fine, but this is 2 decks up. So we need to be careful to either make it so that this is a place where you can get to via ladder, or there needs to be a space for an elevator. If there's a space for an elevator, then it's going to be right here, and that would mean that this would probably have to be a little bit further back because that's not a very good spot for it. But that's fine. We'll get around to it. For now, we're going to want to make sure that there's also a space for a staircase. So I'm going to put these here as staircase indicators. So we're going to have something like this. And then what we'll want to have is just a little bit of underslung, because I think that looks cool. So we'll just bring this down here and create a little bit of underslung elements like that. And now we have to decide where we're going to want to have all of our connections. So these blue elements are going to be things that you must have connections to. Now, if I put it up here, then that would mean that you must have these elements up above. And I think that that's fine in the back, but I don't think that's good in the front. So in the front, we're probably going to want to have them like, I think these would be good spots. And then I can also make these good spots like this. And now the thing about that is that in order to connect to these, they have to be hallways. Since they have to be hallways, this insists that there must be a staircase between them, because when you put two hallways like this, you're gonna get a staircase. And I kind of like having that kind of signature in a ship. I like having the idea that the way that it's laid out forces you to have very specific setups at very specific places. You can freeform a lot of it, but not that particular spot. So back here, what I'm going to do is this guy needs to be an ordinary cube. And then we're going to just push this out and have this be something where it's going to have a connection. But I want to make it a little bit annoying. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it half a deck down like this and then pull it back. Now the reason that that's annoying is because right now there's no staircase going forward and backwards. This cannot be a staircase. And since it's only half a deck, it also can't be an elevator, which means that the connection that we get to these guys is going to have to be something that will be able to mate with the rest of the ship. So this, for example, would work fine. So would pulling these guys back like this, because these 2-meter gaps are stairable. So when we create this sort of deck and a half drop, we'll get a wonderful set of connections to work with. I can make this a lot more annoying by forcing this issue. If I don't have these capabilities here, because there's something in the way, then this is going to be the only way we can get into the back, which in turn makes it extraordinarily obnoxious to get into this one up here. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to move these like this. Yeah, that's going to be just the right combination, I think. So with this in mind, I think that that's going to work. Yeah, that's going to work. I think what I'm going to do, I kind of like the idea. No, I'm thinking out loud to myself, but these ideas are better for science ships. For a military ship, I think this is a good layout. So this will be the front, and this will be the back. And now what we have to do is actually build the ship itself. So we're going to just sketch it out using lines first. Now, there is actually a line sketcher function in Blender, but in this case, I'm going to use actual like mesh lines, just because that way I will be able to convert them into the final mesh relatively easily. So, you can create them however you want. For example, I can just grab this plane here and tell it to merge at center. And now I've got a point. Only problem being I can't see it. Why can't I see the... Oh, there we are. There's always one thing that makes it so that it doesn't quite work. So what we're going to want to do is have a couple of lines flowing across this ship. So this armor line is going to run towards the front and the back like so. Let's go ahead and turn on mirroring. So this is going to be an armor line which protects the ship's elements from getting too much damage. But even as we put the armor line in, you can see how it doesn't quite work with the rear ending here. And that's the whole point. What we're going to have is we're going to need a particular kind of profile. And I think what we're going to do is have the edge of the back of the ship. Just to use this for sketching purposes. Oh, what happened? What? Okay, I don't know why it shrunk all of a sudden. So if we Control-Alt-Shift-S, it'll skew, and we can skew it along the plane of these boxes, and then move it a little bit until it's in roughly the right spot, and then just extrude it back, just to give us a feel for what sort of back end this ship is likely to have. But I don't really like it looking like this, so what I'll do is I'll skew this the other way, like so, and this will be what it ends up having as a profile. So these connections here are going to connect to a very long, large part of the ship that's going to be fairly heavily armored. I'm thinking that would be a good spot for reactors. So we could also put turrets there, but this is a kind of small ship. I guess turrets would still make some sense. Well, we have plenty of time to think about that. So what we're going to do is just take a look at how this looks when I add in the idea of armor. This is all just sketching, so it's not really a complete idea or anything. But as you can see, this can't simply be pulled across because that blue form is in the way. That blue form has to be there, so that means we just have to move this forward, and that means this moves forward. And then we can just extrude this down, like so. I want it to be exactly 4 though. 1, 2, 3, 4. There we are. So this is obviously very, very basic, but the idea here is that we're going to have a nice sweep. We're going to have a nice sweep. So to get that to work, what we're going to do is we're going to cut, and then we're going to cut, and then we're going to cut. And I cut a lot of times there on purpose. I can change it exactly to a certain amount later. But if I pull this out like that, let's see here, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. And then I do this like that. I can then pull these back straight, like this. And then they can join in that line that we've created, like that. So you can sort of see how this might end up looking. And if we scale this out, you can sort of get a feeling for how this might end up feeling. Yeah, I think that's probably going to be okay. It's certainly going to be distinctive. So now the front of the ship has to have a fun little setup. And what we've got here is we've got a lot of doors, a lot of connections, and we have to decide how they're connecting. They can connect forward, they can connect sideways. So one of the things we can do is we can actually put a unit in here. So let's go ahead and try that out. We'll just grab one of these and duplicate it and bring it across. Actually, let's just extrude it straight across, turn on clipping, and so if we have something like this, it's relatively easy for us to then just, oh, that's too much extruding. We could then block this area off so that the player can't put anything in there. And then, with that in mind, this whole front area could become an extrusion. I turned clipping off at the wrong time there. That's fine, we'll put it back in a second here. Oh, excuse me. Told you I might burp into the mic. Sorry about that. So if we have those connect forward into this area, we can have this also connect forward, but I think it makes more sense to have it connect sideways. So in order for us to feel like that, you can see how this isn't on the correct line anymore. It's not properly lining up in exactly the right spot. So what we'll do is we'll just drag these back and then extrude them forward again. So if these are going to be going sideways like that, oh, I see why. Well, that's fine. We can fix that later. So if we're going to be going sideways, then these are the pieces that are going to be going out sideways, and we can just extrude them and pull this forward like that. And then, of course, these two shapes don't have to be distinct. So we can merge them together into one sweeping shape, in which case these are a little bit miscalibrated, but something we can fix. And obviously, I'm still just sketching. This is not something that is done. We're just creating the form, and then we'll go in and actually put in the mesh once we know what the shape of the ship is. But I kind of like this idea. I like the idea of it having a little bit of a hammerhead. Not much, just a touch of a hammerhead. And then we've got this armor element that protects these pieces from any sort of damage. And then it sweeps back into that slope there. But if I do that, I need to have a slope on both sides. So we'll just grab here, pull these forward, and then move these forward as well. And that's the sort of shape I'm thinking for there. Now, we're going to want to have some landing elements, because this is a frigate, or something tiny, a corvette. It's probably a bit too big for a corvette. But either way, it's supposed to be relatively small, so we're not going to want to have it as a deep space only ship. We're going to want to have some legs so it can land. Whether it lands on a planet or on a space station or whatever, it needs to be able to land. So that's what I'm going to just put in as sketched elements right here. And we'll just even those out. And we'll make those look better when it comes into it. But you can see how they kind of collide a little bit with this shape we've got in the back here. So what we might actually want is have these come out as a rear set of legs as well. Something like that. And then the last thing we have to decide on before we actually build the hull is this section here on the top. And I think that the best option for us is to literally just seal it off, except for the very central section. So we can do the exact same thing we have been doing and create a sweeping sort of feel, which we can simply do by cutting and moving and then maybe beveling out. And then, you know, that sort of feel. And then extend it so that it fits the entirety of the ship, like so. Now, the problem with this approach is that it obscures the interior of the ship so that the player might have a hard time seeing it. But we'll have filters for that eventually. For now, I might make it a different hull segment so that when it happens, I can just hide it for now and then, you know, bring it back in later. So if we bring this up, because I kind of want them to all be a little bit hammer-headed. For a basic shape, I think that's probably fine. I think that this back end needs to be adjusted a little bit. So, do I want it wider? I think what I want it to have is flared elements, which is not the same as being wider. Like that. So that's my sketch. So what we're going to do is we're going to go over here and we're just going to turn it over into a wireframe mode so that we don't have to look at it full on anymore. And then here we're going to also change this into wireframe mode. Now notice that the wires are not colored. So this is something where we might have to flip it back and forth a couple of times because it's hard for me to tell which of those is you know, the connector and which of those is just space. But it's something where I remember it fairly clearly, so I won't worry about it too much. But I wish the wireframe was colored. Oh well. So now we're going to go and build this ship. And I think that the place to start is with this rear element. And also, well, you know what? I think maybe the place to start is with the flared sides, because that's the thing that's most likely to cause me topological problems when I try and do anything with it. OmniFlow says, how can you still be motivated after more than a year of development? Does the streaming help with motivation? Well, this is a different game. But yeah, if I wasn't streaming, I probably would have gotten bored by now. You have to realize I'm not a pro dev. I'm just a hobbyist. So for me, it's more important to keep on task rather than accomplish things quickly. So streaming is a huge help for that. I get people who stop by and like, who are you talking to? There's nobody watching your streams. I'm talking to myself. I'm talking to anybody who's listening, because the whole point is just to keep me focused. So if we are going to just scale this up by 2 here, and that's going to be the right size to act as the central element, but the central element is not actually what we want to have. So we're just going to cut these center faces out. Kaboom! And now we've got a top and a bottom. And that's going to be of great use to us. So we'll just put that here. And as you can see, I don't know if YouTube even shows this because it's hard to even see on my screen, but the wireframe black is right there. You know, I might adjust the colors on this at some point in the future because it's hard to see what's going on. Either way, we'll just extend these so that they are just the right size. Yeah, that's correct. I think I actually want this to be here. Yeah, so these are 3 units, 12 meters aside. And what we'll do is we'll turn these into the pieces that we're going to need, and then we'll extrude them so that they sweep correctly. You know, now that I'm thinking about it, I think it would be better if these were 8 instead of 12. Yeah, like this. Then we can get a nice good sweep coming off the back. So then we'll just extend them both like this and like this. And these elements here are going to be the ones where it starts to do its sweep. So we'll go ahead and select them. And it looks like I missed this guy. That's fine. Just do it again. The Roland says that he likes it when I talk stuff through because it makes for better episodes. I think that that is definitely true for certain kinds of people. Some kinds of people really hate it, but all I can say is that they probably shouldn't watch my channel. All right, so now we've got a little bit of the sweep here, and we'll work out the rest of the sweep later. I just want to make sure that I don't forget about it. So with this in mind, we can now grab these elements and turn them into something a little bit more in line with what we would actually need here. And that would be just a shell over the top. And you can see how the shell is actually quite high and thick. So that might be a little bit too high. I might want it a little bit sleeker than that. So we'll just bring it up 2 meters for now. And then down here, this is going to actually merge into the skates at the bottom. I think that the skates might be mounted straight onto this rather than in the center of the ship. So for that, well, now that I think about it, it might be better if they're in the back like that. Yeah, okay, so we'll just bring this down, but we're not making it symmetrical here because there's no point. So what we're going to do is we're going to have this area be pretty heavy, because that's going to be basically just the structural brace element, and I can always change it later. Now the question is, how are these going to end up merging into the front and the back of the ship? The good news is it doesn't really matter, because none of that stuff is going to end up causing us any issues. But for the sake of having the pieces that we need, I think it would be a good idea to put doors in where there are going to be system doors on the ship. Now you can see how this is a mirrored doorway, so we're going to apply that mirror because it's gonna be changing in a second here, because we're going to go inside and take this whole door wherever we need it, and then we're going to apply the mirror because this ship is mirrored, as you can see. So just for the sake of knowing what's going on, we're going to turn this back into a full visual. Oh, where did the door go? There we go. And this is, I believe, going to be here. Yeah, that looks right. But I made a mistake. I made a rookie mistake. We actually want to move the whole object. And the reason for that is because that way, when we rotate it, it will rotate around the logical center rather than just an arbitrary point. So that's going to be one of our doors. And this is going to be one of our doors. And we're going to also put a door. Do I want doors to the inside between these two hallways? You know what? I think that might be a fun idea. Let's go ahead and do it. Door. And then when we bring them back to the back of the ship, door there. I don't know whether I want a door to the side or not for these. Either way, we're going to want a door here. And we're also going to want a door here. Nope, too far. The lower door, I think we're fine with just that one rear-facing door. Because I can't think of that many more systems that we might need. Well, I guess we can have... Well, we can put it in now. We can always take it out later. It's just a matter of deleting a specific mesh, so it's not a big deal. All right, so those are the doors we're going to need. So now what we're going to do is we're going to put these back into wireframe only. And then we're going to select all the doors and merge them together. And then we're going to apply the location, and that will give us this setup here. We're going to apply the rotation, and that'll give us the correct setup. So those are the doors that we're going to need to keep in mind as we're building our ship. So now that we've got them, let's go ahead and build our ship. This is the ship so far. Let's just go back into edit mode and start to clean it up. So this hammerhead look, it's framed around this center line here, but I don't think it has to be. I think it can be a little bit low slung. So let's create a new cube and move it out front. And let's create a slightly low slung nose for this. This is exactly on the middle right now. If we bring it down just 1 meter, it'll feel a little bit low slung, and I think that's probably for the best. So I think that we're going to want it to have some sort of forward-facing guns. That's going to be something we want to put in as a circle right now. And I'm using a fairly high-density circle because we're not building the gun, we're building the frame around the gun. So, you know, we'll have to decide how we want it to look. And I think the idea here is we don't actually want it directly on top of the door. Because if we do that, then the door is walking straight into the gun, and that doesn't make much sense. What we can do is we can have it go straight back into this heavy hull section that I built. And so if we do that, we can scale this up, and then we can pull it straight back like this. And then that can be the gun housing, right? And then we'll just grab this front edge here and skew it like that. And I think what we'll do is we'll end up getting rid of this set of lines, but let's leave it for now, because it's easier to get rid of them than to add them back in when we decide that we didn't mean to. So we're going to just start to adjust this. We don't want this face, because it's in the middle of the ship and nothing is there. So the question is, how is this going to end up merging with the guns that we've got? And I think that the idea here is that it's just going to go ahead and butt up straight into it like this, and then wrap around it. So to wrap around it, we're going to duplicate this, and then we're going to scale it up. Now you can see that this larger circle is not vertically aligned, because it's just not. But that's something we can fix, and it's fun to try and figure out how it'll look. So we're going to go ahead and pick these, and then switch over to active element mode, and then we'll pick this, and then we'll scale Y0, and you can see how that flattens it to a specific plane.
Now, in order for this to work out, we're going to need to do that for both of the circles. Like that. Oh, I got the back somehow. And now they're both aligned. And that's where we would want these things to come in and hit. So what we're going to do is we're going to take both of these elements and just move them forward until they line up pretty close to perfectly. It doesn't have to be exact. And then we can just bridge the edge loops. But first, let's reverse this because it's pointed the wrong way. There we go. Boom. Bridge edge loops. And now we've got this edge loop situation. What we want to do is have our front nose merge in with that setup. So just pull it back and then begin to merge. We don't need this interior set. Just delete that. And then what we'll do is cut and then just start manually creating the faces that we might need. The only issue is that right now, the circles don't have the same cuts across them, so we've got this kind of awkward divot running in rather than a nice slice across. But you know what? We can fix that just by slicing across. It's pretty straightforward. And then we just grab this here and scale Y0 and bang. We got a nice crease, see? Now there's still a little bit of damage down here where we got the same problem with these others. But you know what? That is just as easy to solve. We can just keep doing this. So cut from here to here, and from here to here. And that will create another set of nice creases. This crease down the middle is something we can just get rid of. So we'll just delete those edges. And then we will fill in here. The only problem being that that's going to create... Is that the kind of crease I want? I guess it doesn't matter. It's close enough, so we'll leave it. Yeah, so once I add in the standard smooth auto smoothing, we can just tell it to actually make this a hard crease. And it'll look fine. The only issue is that it's not precisely flat, so we'll just make it flat like this. I think that's fine. And then what we'll do is we'll bring these guys down to that level, like this. And then we'll have a nice flat surface to connect everything on up here. And as you might guess, we're going to want to have this go all the way across the top until it is perfectly flat like this. And in order to do that, this whole face needs to be the same height. So there you go. I think it was pretty close to right already, but now it's definitely right. And then we'll just extrude out on this side, scale it to here, and then repeat the same process. So we'll create this crease, and then we will just start to cut across. We'll use the same subdivide tactic. There we are. And then, boom, nope, I went the wrong way. Shaboom, 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 shaboom. All right, so now we've flattened out that central piece. And there are other types of ways to handle that have a few fewer faces. But I think that worked okay. I'm not too unhappy with that. The question is, what do we do about this center area? Well, one thing we could do is we could just bring these straight across. I don't think that's going to work, especially if I forget to turn on clipping. There we are. I think that that's going to end up feeling a little bit too weird and flat. There we go. Yeah, that doesn't feel quite right. I think what I need to have happen is I need to have this cruise back into the frame of the ship like this. But not so aggressively. So it's more going to be like that. Only problem being that I didn't have the right thing selected. So what we'll do is we will select the right thing and try it one more time. There we go. I don't need you. There. So you can see how now we've got a little bit of a divot, and we can just keep repeating this process. But again, we have to have the right things selected. So I'll just crease it a little bit more with each of these. There you go. That's more or less what I had in mind. Hooray! So with this happening, we've got some of our front frame working out. Matacon says, where in an open game like yours do you feel time gating feels appropriate to implement? That's a really interesting question because this game does have time gating in it, not for monetization, but to try and keep the flow working. And I can't say I'm an expert. All I know for sure is that much of the industry, the casual game industry, the mobile game industry, is moving away from time gating. Not very fast, but there's a shift away from time gating towards just flat out gacha machines. So we're seeing a lot more gacha machine games coming out, and a lot of the ones that used to just be time gates are now time gates plus gacha machines, and the time gates are getting steadily more lax. So I have a feeling that time gates are not going to be something we see a lot of in maybe 5 years or so. They're probably going to be largely starting to phase out. But, you know, Nostradamus here. I use time gating when I want to push the player to try another kind of mechanic. And in this case, the time gating for our setup for this game is you've got ship design and then you've got crew missions. And I want the player to sort of switch between them. Not all the time, but I want them to have a little bit of each in their diet. So if you play it for a long time in ship design, then you're not going to have any income. So you're not going to have enough cash to make more ships. You don't have to do the mission setup for very long to make enough cash to continue, but you still have to do it for a little bit. And then similarly, if you're doing the missions, if you keep doing missions, you're eventually going to run out of ships. So it's sort of back and forth, but that's not really a time gate. It just feels like a time gate because it's resources that run out and then you have to go do something else for a little while. Still, I'm not a professional. If you're talking about monetization, don't ask a hobbyist. Because our answer is inevitably, why are you monetizing? Everything should be free, man. All right, so back here, we've got this set up, and what we need to do is have these come out and meet up, but you can see how they're not the same alignment. One of them is higher than the other, but that's not a big issue. We can just sweep it up, no biggie. We'll delete these verts, and then we'll just merge here with a face, and that will do the job just fine. To make it a little softer, we'll just soften the flow a tiny bit. Matacon says, it was more about general game design. Yeah, I'm not a big time gate fan, so I don't really know. What I prefer to do instead of time gates is I prefer to do pull-aways. I don't know what you want to call them. I made some videos about them, but basically the idea is that the player is eventually going to be in the mood for something else, but they may not even realize it. So in my mind, the best thing to do is to continually give them just little other avenues, little things that they can click on to go and do other kinds of gameplay. For example, in Skyrim, If you're in the woods, you're eventually going to see a dungeon. You're eventually going to see a city. You're eventually going to see, a woodsman's shack. And these are things where if you want to stay in the wilderness, you can keep doing that. But if you have any inclination to go off and do another kind of gameplay, it's not going to be long before you see that that is available. If you're not in the mood, you probably just pass it by. You won't even realize it. If you are in the mood, you'll notice it and you'll gravitate towards it subconsciously. But that's just, that's just my idealism talking. For now, let's see. I think that for the top of this object, we're going to want to have it have... I'm thinking about what kind of shape to have for this top element, and I think it's going to be sloped out towards the side. So if I were to bring it up like this, I think that what we want to have happen is this is going to be taller, and then these are going to be shorter. And then we're going to just grab this whole shebang and stretch it out on the x-axis until it is the right size. Like that. Maybe a little bit less. Like that. Perfect. Now, as for this part, I think I'm going to do it again and just have this whole area... not the back, though. Stop that. What did you just do? DOSBox my ass. Thanks, Windows key. You're a big help. For fuck's sake. There we go. All right, so that's not okay at all. You can see the problem is that they're sliding inwards like that, which is not going to work for us, but we have a couple of options. One option is I can actually make it with a series of cuts instead. Another option is we can just have it be flat again, and I kind of like that idea, so let's go ahead and do that. What we're going to do is we're going to pick one of these points on this edge, which I think is this. This is good, and then we will scale it down like this. Yeah, and we'll just have the exact same setup as we had above. Again, this is going to rely on cuts to sell this as something that works. So like that, and then again, you have to flatten it out like this. And then these are going to be sharp creases. And I think, again, make sure that it's flat. There we are. And then, as you can see, what we don't have is this part. So we're just going to bring this part out as well. There we go. Perfect. So now I've got some circular elements and some not so circular elements. I'm not sold 100% on this, though. You know what? After I did all that, I think I'm going to clear out some of this because there are some pieces here that I don't buy. So this outer area is going to go away. So if I were to deselect this interior and only delete this exterior, it should do a minimum amount of damage to the rest of the ship. Boom. There we go. It's gone. Now the reason I decided not to do it like that is because I think this would be better if I didn't change circle sizes. Unfortunately, this front is a little bit damaged, but I think it's damaged in the correct way. I probably would have damaged it in the same way if I did it, again. So instead of doing it with scaled circles, what we're going to do is we're going to do it with this one circle, but it's going to just be carefully manipulated so that it doesn't have any of the issues. So we'll just... It's a little hard to see what I'm doing because the sun is actually quite bright today. It's friggin' cold, but it's bright. All right, so we're going to get rid of that section like so. And then similarly up on top, we're just going to repeat the process. There we go. And then what we can do is have this intersection just go straight across. Yeah, it looks like we got some doubles. There we go. And then if we flatten it like so, that's going to be fine because it's still going to have the correct shape for the rest of that hallway. And then what we'll do is we'll bring it over like so and then fill in the gaps. Roughly like that. Unfortunately, these are sloped, so we're going to want to unslope them. There we go. And then we can bring these over and make them into a little bit less. There we are. And then we're going to repeat the process on the other side. So I think that most people use Boolean operators, which I've tried. But Blender, I can't get Blender to work right with Boolean operators. It always just explodes and stops working. Nothing but errors when I try and do Booleans in Blender. And maybe that's my fault, but it does mean that I don't use them. Not in Blender, anyway. So when I build a ship, I usually build it to piece by piece like this, which I don't think is the right way to build them. I think that there are better approaches, faster approaches. It's just that I can't seem to use them. Not in Blender. So I still think of it like this. Right. That doesn't seem like such a bad front face to get started with. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to have a nice, sharp, rectangular feature like this. And then we're going to just bring it down a touch. And then bring it straight back. Like that. I don't want to mount the skids there because the skids are a structural element, and I don't want this to have a structural element attached to a gun. I doubt anyone would ever notice, but I would notice. So we're going to mount the structural element here on the nose piece that I've created. In order to do that, we're going to have to pull this nose piece up like this. And then close this loop, which is just going to be some basic setups. I think we're going to need to cut. I'll just... Oh, that was weird. There we are. Just close that and then start to bring it across. There we go. And then this inner element, what we're going to want to do is actually have it be enough pronounced that it's definitely separate, like this. And then just bring it straight back. And then we can close this. like that. And then we'll put in the skid right here. So we'll just extrude down. And we'll refine the skid later, but basically it's not really a landing leg, it's just a skid. Because landing legs are annoying. And I don't want to start modeling machinery for everything right now. There we go. Now, do we have an interior set of faces there? No, good. Left clipping on, good. Right, so that's the sort of setup I'm thinking for there. I think that what I want to do is actually have some fun major shielding elements right here that pull it out. So what we're going to do is we're going to duplicate these. And the reason we're duplicating rather than extruding is because I actually don't want them connected. I want them separate. So we're going to go ahead and do that and then pull this back a little bit. And then we're going to grab and extrude this entire segment and pull it back like that. And we're going to go ahead and adjust how this looks. I want to know whether it should look that way from the start or whether it's something where it should be. I think we're going to want to smooth into it. So we're going to create a cut, and then we're going to go ahead and extrude these faces and slap these down together. And then we're going to want to just adjust the cut until it is not significant. I want it to have a nice feel to it, but I don't want it to feel too big. So we'll just go ahead and do it like that. And then we'll adjust this front cut so that it feels more organic. Ink. There we are. Ooh, that didn't feel less. That was the wrong axis. There we are. And basically what I can do is I can make these the back skids so that if I wanted to do that, I just add in a little bit of a poof. And then I can just switch back to not 3D cursor, active element, grab this foot and slap it into the same height. Yeah, I actually don't mind that as a basic idea. Now let's start on the engine elements. So I like the rockets to feel like they're in the right spot. This is something where a lot of rocket ships in science fiction don't actually work. They're off center by so much that they wouldn't be able to keep you going straight. I like Evactress says, "Hi, hello." So what I like to do is I like to make sure that the rockets in the back of the ship actually feel like they're in the right spot. And what that means in this case is that it's going to be pretty low. They're going to be down here. But I am planning to add some big heavy stuff on top, so they're a little bit higher than you might think. I guess the right thing to do would be to start with the big heavy stuff and then put the rockets in afterwards. So with that in mind, let's go ahead and add in just a little bit of big heavy stuff. Oh, sorry, inside the same object. No, come on, Craig, click correctly. So we're going to go ahead and scale this up. Well, that didn't scale up quite like I expected. That's better. I think that what we're going to do is we're going to have a reactor core, which is, and these two doors pointed inwards that you see here, we're going to slap the reactor core in there. So we'll scale this down until it lines up with the doors there, and then we'll just shape it until it feels right. So just bring it in. But we have to make sure not to interfere with any of the actual deck So let's turn the deck back on for a second so that we can see it and make sure that we're not in the way. There we go. And you can see that we are. This is a little bit too low. It's clipping through some of the deck. So we're just going to fix that. And one of the things we're going to do to fix that is to bring this part up a little bit. But we're also going to put in some cuts and have it be a little bit of a rising element, just a little bit up from where it is now. So just like this, and then pop it up like that. And then to make it a reactor, we're just going to grab this whole back face and just pull it straight. Oh, you know what? We don't need the both sides here. Just the left side is fine. Okay. So if we bring this back, we can turn this into a reactor in a bunch of different ways, but the easiest way is to start pulling up these elements into something that resembles a sort of reactory setup. And I think that we're actually going to have it be taller in front rather than in back. So that's not hard to do. Something like this works fine. Maybe I'll just pull this up another touch. And then we'll just have it cut around the middle here. And then there's going to be like an overhang. Yeah, I'm going to have to adjust that, I think. So let's bring this down a little bit, like here. And then there's going to be an overhang. And the overhang will butt right up against this bit of the hull, because that way we'll be forcing the player to not go any further back than there. And that's kind of the point. But in order to make it look good, we'll just grab this edge and bevel. There we go. And then we can also grab the top edge, and you can either bevel it or, you know what, let's undo that and let's bevel it enough that it goes above the lip. Yeah, because that way we can just pull this whole face forward again without worrying too much. And we'll just smooth this so that it's got a good arc. Something like that. And that's going to be the shape of our reactor. Now, to make the reactor feel right, what we're going to need to do is add in some additional elements that feel more reactory. There are a lot of different kinds of space reactors for imaginary sci-fi spaceships. And I think that we've got circles. So for the other ships, we've got the use of circles in anything that's supposed to be future-y. So I think that that's probably still a good thing. But the circles that are aligned like this are warp circles. So I think that if we align them from another angle like this, we can make them feel like they are energy circles instead. So to do that, we're just going to add in a circle and bring it on up. And there we go. And we're going to want it to be the right size, which I believe is probably going to be... Yeah, that's probably a little bit too big. There we are. And then we'll extrude it back. And then what we're going to need to do is make this into something that the player can buy. And in order for that to have happening, we're going to want to make it feel, in order for that to happen, we're going to want to make it feel like there is a space specifically for these circles in this reactor setup. And that means we're going to create some divots. So cut here, and then we will just have it here and here, and we'll extrude those in like this, and then we'll just shrink them over to the side a little bit like that. We could shrink them on other axes as well, but let's give that a shot, see how it feels. I guess that's fine. Alright, so now what we'll do is we'll grab this and we will sink it down into this frame. And then later, we'll add a little bit of a lattice to it. So with this in mind, you can see that we have far too much circle. Now, if you were doing this for just a rendering's sake, who gives a shit? But in our case, this is a 3D model for a space game. So having too much circle is actually quite bad. That's probably a little too little circle. Let's That's better. So that's basically fine. And what we're going to do is we are going to use bevel to our advantage, and we're going to create some nice beveled glow elements. Hooray! Maticon says, I'm presuming the yellow and cyan is where the players can customize. Yeah, so the point here is that the space frames have all of the complicated space bits, warp drives and magic space guns and shield units and all that stuff. And those come pre-packaged for you. The player creates the crew elements, and these multicolored cubes are the same size as crew elements. Crew quarters come in 4x4 grid. So that's what we're seeing there. The blue ones are where there are doors into the space frame. And those are places where the player has to put a hallway there so that they can, connect to the space frame properly. And it's not just as simple as it sounds, because that's just a trick to lure you into thinking that you're simply assembling a crew. But in actuality, it's programming. Dun, dun, dun. So the idea here is that it's a gateway drug. But, who knows if that'll work out. You can talk big all you'd like. It doesn't really matter until you've finished. So we've got hull, and then here we've got glow, and then there we've got glow, and there is our glow frame. Hurrah! So we're going to just create duplicates of that. You know what? Let's punch it out. Punch out the gem. And the reason I'm doing that is because that way I can use an array modifier. Not that direction. Yep. And in the actual game, there will be like glow in there. It'll actually be lit. So that's going to be nice. It's going to be fun to see. We're going to go ahead and UV unwrap this now, because that way, you know what? We're going to cut it. See how there's an X mirror, but I didn't actually delete half of the stuff. So it looks identical. Yeah. Let's unwrap it again. There we are. We're also going to tell it that it's smooth, like that. We've got the auto normalize on, so that smoothness is just smooth enough. I deleted the faces. How horrible. So we're just going to put the faces back in. Bring it down, and then just select everything. Face. Select everything. Face. Perfect. Keelblock says, is this for your space game or something new? Well, both. It's a space game, but it might not be the space game that you're remembering, depending on when you last logged in. The debris game isn't really... I mean, I finished. It's not really a game. It was never really intended to be a big ordeal. It's only about half an hour long. But that's done. And I learned a lot, so now I am coming back to the scene of the crime and creating a larger game. And today, I am simply creating a space frame. There we are. So those are going to be the reactor elements. And what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to actually put a frame on top so that the reactor elements don't look completely unprotected. And for that, I think what we're going to want is another cut. There we are. And we'll just cap across using a very simple cap. Oh yes, bright blue. That is definitely the color that suits the hull best. We can cut. That one doesn't need it. We can cut. And then that'll just help us to preserve a little bit of our setup here. And then what we'll do is we'll just extrude here a little touch. And then we can grab the tips and bring them back and shape them in. And there, we've got some real primitive frame. But I think that it's too wide. So what we're going to do is we are going to bevel and bring this frame in. And then the last thing we're going to do is add in a glass element. So to do that, we're just going to create a big fat face all across this area. But doing that is actually a little harder than you might think, just because of the way that Blender thinks about faces. So we're going to have to manually fill it, I think. Yeah. Yeah, it doesn't like having these faces that are built like this. No biggie. I can manually make it do anything I want. And if I can figure out the complicated command words that it requires, button presses that don't make any sense. So this is going to be glass, or what passes for glass. And you can't see very well what the glass is here in Blender's view mode, because in this view mode, it doesn't really render very well. But you can see it here if I go into a higher rendering mode. Once Eevee comes out, we're going to have a real fun time with render modes. But until then, we're stuck with this kind of setup. Still, let's go ahead and turn on the smoothing. And we're going to want to just add in some crisp little edges to make it feel right. That doesn't feel right. Undo. Sorry, I'm thinking about the best way to handle this, and I think that the best way to handle it is to bring them way out to the edge, like this, and then just schlep them in manually. And then make those the sharp. Yeah, that's probably a little bit better. These edge elements, just adjust them a little bit so that they make a little more sense. Good enough for now. Let's go ahead and make this back element flare a little bit so that it feels a little bit better. Now, one of the issues we're going to have is that the whole space frame needs to have a specific shape in order to feel right. And what we've got here is not that specific shape. In addition, I appear to have... Oh, that's just way out of joint. That's the only problem. Sorry, I need to pay more attention when I'm randomly moving stuff around, right? I got the curve backwards. That's fine. And you can see that the original space frame idea was this sort of long beetle cut. And what I've got here instead is a much shorter, heavier cut. I actually don't want that. Because I spent quite a bit of time trying to make this beetle cut work out, the longer cut work out, and all of my other spaceships are beetly. So what we're going to do is we're going to try to make this fit better by punching it out specifically. But before we get too excited, we need to pull these back in, because otherwise it won't end up working. So if they're not in the same object, there we are. Did I accidentally merge anything else in? No, good. So that's all of the objects. Oh, but... Oh, idiot. There we are. So we've got to apply the array modifier. There we are. So now we've got the whole thing in one object, and we can move it around and reshape it. We have to be a little bit careful just because of the way that they have a specific spherical or circular shape, and we don't want to end up screwing that up. But if we move this like so, and then we just bring it in a little bit, is that going to work? What if we do it the other way? That actually looks like it might work. Well, let's go ahead and try it like this for a little while. I might redo it. So, again, the doorways are up here in the front. The blue elements are where the doors are. So in order for this to work out, what we're going to need to do is have the same thing we had before, where this goes up and kind of closes off this access here. So we'll just try it. Yeah, I guess that's probably the best we're going to get there. So one of the other issues we've got is that it is on the wrong side of the ship. So we're going to have to scale x -1 it. There's just no other option. And then we're going to have to apply the scale, and then we're going to have to reverse all the UIs. There we are. All the UVs, rather. So, with that in mind, it should be ready to rumble. Let's go ahead and work out how the engines might look. Excuse me. So if we add in more circles, we're going to do them as a separate object this time. And we scale them up, and then we move them around, just inside now. And then if we think about where they need to go, I think that this is actually about the right height. Because it has to be in the center of the mass, and the reactor is going to be pretty heavy, so maybe here-ish. And then I'll just bring it straight back. And then align it properly. And then what we'll do is we'll have a hoop that runs across the outside. So to get that hoop, what we're going to want to do is actually bring this in and then extrude it out. And then we can form the hoop out of this. And the way to do that is to delete half of these faces. And then use the remainder as the hooping element. Now, I could just bring it across like this, but the problem with that is that the actual frame here doesn't really work very well for that. So I think I need to actually adjust the entire frame, and I think that that's going to mean deleting a lot more than I thought. There we are. So if I do that, and then I can bring this up, turn on proportional editing. Yeah, if I bring it up like this, then I can bring it down like this. And this can be like a space frame element that circles the back here. And then I think I want to pull it out to the side. And then maybe scale it up. And then I'm going to bring this cross into that hoop. Now the thing is, I was picturing a hoop that was tilted. And this isn't tilted, but it could be tilted. Let's go ahead and tilt it. First we're going to turn proportional editing back on, and we're going to just pull it. Oh, I see. There's no cuts. So let's add some cuts and try it. And then we're going to turn off proportional editing and then tilt the whole thing, which is just a matter of selecting this much perhaps, and then bringing it down. And we'll just adjust exactly how it looks after the fact. Oh, actually, I think I want to bring it up rather than down. That is more like what I had in mind. It's actually not bad for what I had in mind, but I'm worried that I'm getting off base. I'm worried that I'm forgetting how the ship should flow. This is something I do a lot, and that's the reason why when you're modeling with Booleans, it makes a lot more sense and it's a lot easier. But Blender doesn't allow you to do that very well. At least it didn't. Should I go ahead and try modeling with Booleans again? I really didn't expect to be spending this long on it. Because basically what we've got here is a very specific shape that actually cuts through. You know what? Let's go ahead and start with the idea that it cuts through, and then we can adjust it later. So if we're wanting to cut it through, then we just need to bring it back, scale it up. And then what we want to do is flatten it on the top and the bottom, which we can do just by grabbing the top and the bottom and flattening them. That's not the top and the bottom. I knew there was something wrong. The other thing I want to do is delete half of the circle. I can't see what I'm doing. All right, so now if I were to bring this forward, ooh. What I really want to do is pull it out. There we are. Now we're back to where we started with this. And I think it's just a little bit too tall. So we're going to shrink it down. And then what we're going to do is sculpt it until it is the right kind of shape. And then extrude it back like this. And now for the rear element, what we're going to do is we're going to extrude this up like so. And then bring like that. That's kind of how I want it to look in terms of overall shape. And if I want the reactor to get along with it, all I have to do is cut here and then cut here, and then get rid of this piece because now it won't be in the way. And now we'll just tell it that it's all smooth except for when it's not. Now in terms of putting an engine inside this, we're going to need another circle. So circle. The clipping mode is on and it has to be off. I'll just flip it. Bring it back. So this is supposed to have warp capabilities, and warp capabilities have a specific look in this game, and it's going to go right here. And I'm going to do that next, but first I just want to make sure that I've got a placeholder for the engines. Once again, we're talking about the interior rather than the exterior. This is the inside face of it. And so if we bring this back and then sculpt it until it is roughly on par, it won't be so difficult for us to merge it in. Now for the other piece that we're going to need, and that would be the warp drive. So duplicate, rotate 90, pull it out, scale it up. And that's what this goes to, the warp drive. So we'll move it so that it's slightly below the meridian point. And I don't want it to interfere with this too much, so we're going to pull it back. Maybe a little bit larger and a little bit further back. Yeah, and then we'll extrude in. And basically that's the shape that we're going to want. And then we'll just pull it out. And we'll work with the interior on that. But basically we don't need this rear face. And then we can just seal the insides for the moment. And you can see how this frame we've got doesn't really line up with that at all. But that's not a big deal because this frame we've got can be easily adjusted to do whatever the heck we want. It's very, very basic. So for example, I could just make it like this and then scale it down on the z-axis and bring it up like so. And we get a nice little crease coming out of the back there, which will give us an opportunity to make this part much more interesting. So we can just pull that back like so. And we can just sort of make this element down here a fun little bump that merges in with the skid. The skid itself is right against the edge, so either we need to make the skid lower or we need to make these higher. I think that making these higher might be a better option there. So we'll just grab all of this stuff and drag it up. And then we'll have room for one more skid, which I think what we'll do is we'll merge it in out of these rear elements. So we'll just grab these 3 faces, extrude them down, flatten them, and then we'll just adjust them. So one of the things we're going to want is to make these flat so that we can do the adjusting relatively easily. And then we'll just... We've got one vert that's sticking. There we are. And you can see how this loop here is going to give us a pain in the ass. So we'll just flatten it out. No biggie. And then we can just pull this up and create a skiff. Just these loops here, we can just bring them back and around. So if we were to grab them like this, you know what? We can just delete this for a moment. We can grab them. Come on, just these parts. What we're going to do is bring this here and then extrude it just a little bit. And the point here is that we're going to be flattening the top side of this. Later on, we'll figure out the best way to integrate that. There we go. And the reason for that is simply because that way we'll be able to integrate it more easily with the back side. And since we're flattening, we should flatten here as well. Good. Keep the topology pretty simple. And clickety, clickety, clickety. Oh, even the clipping's on. There we are. And then we can just pull these back. Oh, it didn't grab everything. Come on, seriously? What's going on here? There we are. Jeez. And pull that back so that it just comes out to the back here. And then we'll just bevel. So... And then we can, well, you know what? I don't really want to bevel. What I really want to do is put in additional cuts and then manually adjust them and scale them. This would have been better if I'd used a loop or something, you know, a curve, because then I would have been able to do this without having just to manually adjust all this crap, but I think it'll work okay. I think I accidentally scaled it on the z-axis. Damn it. Oh, not save. Scale. I don't know why it said save. My brain just shut off. Did you hear that? It started saying, oh, you're done for today, Craig. You should stop. Right. So if we have a skiff with a landing pad that comes back like that, I think that's not going to look too bad. Let's go ahead and light up the drive so that it feels a little bit more natural. Having fun with that. There we are. And then what we'll do is we'll create the crease in the middle here. R, bevel. Why is it so responsive? It's like whipping around. In. And then we'll just set that as this is hull. And this is, nope, glow. And obviously this rear face here that is for some reason selecting way more than it should is just going to be, well, basically we want to have it so that it slopes out properly. So maybe there. It needs to go a little bit further. I'm not real happy with this. I may have wasted everybody's time today. I like the basic idea, but I can't get it to feel right. And maybe part of that is the fact that this isn't tapered properly. It is supposed to come out and be like kaboom shabam, and I didn't do that. Well, I'll think about it. We'll do it some other day. I basically spent the whole day doing nothing. Well, some days are like that. I'll see you folks around if you want to come back and see me muck around and screw up more on Wednesday. Otherwise, see you whenever you're around. Where's the stop button?